Hello and welcome to Reverse Reset Restore, the podcast that aims to help you rediscover your authentic self. I'm your host Sally, former creator of mass illusions and delusions, and I'm on a journey to restore my mind, my physicality, and my health. Change comes from within. Welcome to a bonus episode, a tidbit or titbit, depending on where in the world you are. I wanted to share with you an example of a shift in thought. Now, earlier this year, I'd gone on sick leave from work, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I basically burnt out from having an overburdened workload, already under the strain of, at that stage, a 9-month proposed restructure and probable redundancy looming over my head. My thoughts about myself and my life were in the trash. I was feeling depressed, judged, guilty, and ashamed and undervalued. These thoughts and feelings had left me isolated and sick. My body was in a free-for-all of rebellion. My blood sugars were in constant highs. My sleep was abysmal. I, quite frankly, was just a big mess. In one of my visits to my doctor, as I sat there crying and bemoaning my current state, she drew my attention to how negative my self-talk was in the 10 minutes I had sat in her room. I hadn't really noticed it, if I'm being honest, but I thought it made sense given how utterly low I felt. When you are living in this circle of stress and depression, it's super easy to have thoughts and feelings that only reinforce that. Talk about a perpetual cycle of mental and physical unwellness. She reminded me that I needed to refocus my thoughts again, and that only I could do that. I left her office that day feeling like I had been seen, but also warned. Now, my doctors are really amazing. She kind of gave me a tough love moment, and it was one that I most needed to hear. I was in charge of my life, and while I might not be able to change the outcome of circumstances outside of my control, I had the power to choose my responses to them. I made a conscious decision to return to doing the work of self-restoration. Now, this is something I've been involved in doing over my life for many, many years now. But there have been a lot of times when I've set it aside in my quest to please people at my job or work on other things going on in life. Or just, you get caught up in the hustle and bustle of your existence and you forget that you are beyond the body that you are housed in. So I decided that the work I most desperately needed to kind of spend some time focusing on was in how I talked to myself and my thoughts. Skip forward a few months, and I had been hard at work really digging in deep to who I thought I was and who I actually am. And I was making conscious and consistent efforts to notice any negative thoughts that would appear and counteract them with the truth of a myriad of I am affirmations. Some days felt like I was in a boxing match, just desperately trying to avoid the right hooks and uppercuts of old thinking habits. Ever feel like you zigged when you should have zagged? Other days I noticed how an old story would show up in my thinking, and I would catch it and stop it before it snowballed into an avalanche of oppressive thoughts and feelings. As you may know, this personal development business can be a little bit of a slipping and sliding process. Changing habits takes time, and I'm not always the most patient of creatures when it comes to myself. So this particular morning, not that long ago, I woke up and I just felt meh. I couldn't quite articulate what it was exactly, but just something was off. So I put into practice a couple of strategies I've been using in my change journey. Firstly, I asked my body or my mind, my feelings to tell me what it was. What is this meh feeling? Which I know seems ludicrous and ridiculous, but it does actually work. Immediately, the word doubt came to mind. Now, here is where I would normally Alice in Wonderland my way down the rabbit hole. My old patterns would have had me spinning a dozen stories, each one getting darker and more harrowing, before I would finally come back to the usual suspects of my self-flagellation. I am not enough. But not this day. No, as soon as the word doubt came into my mind, it was followed up with, oh, doubt is just fear's bravado. Bravado is a false courage, and doubt is false fear. How often do we listen to that false fear, that bravado that seeks to keep us restrained to our habits, our beliefs, and our behaviours? If you're anything like me, it's probably happened to you a lot more in your life than you've even realised. Doubt forces us to second guess ourselves. It makes us question our capabilities, and it keeps us from stepping into something more. That's what fear always aims to do. It wants us to stay away from becoming conscious and walking in our light. Fear will always keep us holding on to our hurts, our injustices, and our pain. It does not have your good in mind. So when my mind fired back with, doubt is just fear's bravado, I instinctively knew that this doubt I was feeling was just fear trying to worm its way back into my life and make me feel uncertain and afraid of the future. It didn't actually dawn on me until later in the day when I was sort of sharing this experience with my partner that I realized that this was evidence of how I really have changed my thinking. My first thought had immediately exposed doubt and the fear behind it. I was then able to remind myself that I don't operate out of fear, only love. Fear takes us out of the present moment, and love keeps us in it. It was a super exciting moment for me to realize that not only had I moved out of a thinking habit of anxiety and lack and fear, but that I wasn't just catching the negative thoughts and addressing them, but stopping them in their tracks altogether and thinking in ways that took their power away. Oh my gosh, what an exciting epiphany to have. Have you had moments like that in your journey? I wonder how many times I would have had those moments if I had waited for the breakthrough, but I gave into familiar habits before I even saw it. So I'm challenging the thoughts that no longer serve me every time I'm aware of them. And it's amazing to me just how quickly I have changed that old pattern of thinking, how much peace there is now in my mind because I have retrained my brain to not focus on the thoughts that once harmed me. In a relatively short amount of time, I have changed enough where I can so easily and effortlessly see a thought for what it is. I'm sharing this story because I wanted to encourage you that changing your thoughts is totally possible. We often think ourselves out of change because we don't believe it can happen. When you begin to notice the noise that goes on in your mind, you start to recognize what thoughts are serving you and what thoughts are holding you back. Notice the noise is a technique I'll talk more on in our next episode, but it's all about being conscious to the thoughts you are hosting. Living consciously is the aim here, because when we live in a state of awareness, we are better able to distinguish between the fact and fiction in our thinking. As Nathaniel Branden wrote about in his books on self-esteem, we can then begin to distinguish between three facets of perception: facts, interpretation, and emotion. You know the old saying, there's always three sides to every story: his side, her side, and the truth. In this case, the three sides to our stories are the facts, our interpretation of them based on what we think we know and understand, and the accompanying emotions. I used to be so caught up in thinking and believing the thoughts I had were my own. The reality is, we only make a thought our own when we decide to expand on it, making the thought thinking and the thinking belief. So for me, one of the most exciting things then is to see the shift. When you notice the noise, you can begin to take back control. You can choose to not be drawn into entertaining those thoughts, but just notice them and let them go. And know that they're not you. They really aren't. We've become so used to feeding ourselves lies, we have no idea how much they've been poisoning us or that they really aren't us. If you've been telling yourself that you can't change things in your life, or you've gotten into the habit of beating yourself up all the time, you may not even be aware of those thoughts because they feel so much a part of you. If you're listening to this, it's meant for you to hear. To know and to receive that change is possible, that you can shift the stories in your head and create new ones. Begin to believe it, because I believe in you. I know a whole new way of thinking, a whole new life of possibilities awaits you. And so even if you don't quite believe that yet, know that I do. That I am excited and expectant for the change that will come into your life if you are willing to just be open to it. I can't wait for you to join me in the next episode where we will be going through 5 different strategies to help you change current thought patterns. They're all ones that I've implemented into my life and a big part of why I wanted to share this shift in my own thinking in recent months. If I can do it, you sure can. And I'm here to help you believe it, receive it, and achieve it. If you like what you're hearing, please leave me a review. I would be so grateful. And let me know what topics you'd like me to cover in upcoming episodes. Join the conversation on the Reverse Reset Restore Instagram or Facebook page, and subscribe to this podcast if you're keen to continue your healing journey. I'll stop here with a quote from Nathaniel Braden, which fits beautifully with my Notice the Noise strategy. The first step towards change is awareness.